Now, in terms of your own experience, how has being diagnosed with cancer, and I guess that whole experience been in terms of changing your attitude towards life? I guess at that moment in time when you were diagnosed, did you, what was your initial thoughts, and how did your family react initially to that diagnosis?
Yeah, not well, as you can imagine. I was still like, I knew I had, when I went to hospital, I went to emergency. It's like, yeah, you've got something on your brain. Still hoping that it's not going to be malignant cancer. So 24 hours later, the doctors, flanked by a couple of interns, approached the bed. I could see them coming. I could see the look on their faces. I knew this wasn't good news. And the doctor just stood there and he said, Julie, you have tumors in your liver, both lungs, your brain, your pancreas, your lymph nodes. He went on and on and on. And I'm just like, what the? And he said, it's not good news, as if it was. And I just literally jumped out of bed in my hospital gown and bolted down the corridor with my husband and the doctor's trying to talk to me. And I didn't want a bar of it. And my husband's chasing me. And then it was like incredulous. It's like, how could I have been running yesterday morning and been told in 24 hours that I'm dying and I've got this hideous disease throughout almost every major organ of my body. And like, my husband's obviously not knowing what to say, can you say?
Yeah.
And we get in the car and we're driving through the city and it's a Friday night and everybody's just hanging out of bars and having a great time. And I'm like, I remember thinking in my mind, how can you be doing this? Don't you know what's happened to my family? And in my head, I'm rehearsing how to tell my teenage daughters that their mother was dying.
Yeah.
Um, it, you know,
There's three
it
things
feels like
there.
I'm talking about someone else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's three conversations in that moment, um, that makes me, think. There's a podcast I listen to, by the Australian called Shandy's Story. And in that podcast, basically to keep things quite short and sweet, she was suspectedly murdered by her ex-boyfriend. And there's some inconclusive CCTV footage, but um, in that evening, the police went to their house in northern Queensland and knocked on the door at 3 or 4 a.m. or whatever time it was in the morning, and broke the news to her mother that her daughter had been stabbed to death and was bleeding out on the street. And I think about, how did you digest that information when you received that, from the doctor? How did think about the conversation from the doctor to you? How do they deliver that information? And how, it must be one of the toughest things to do, as I compared there to a police officer providing, a mother with the information that their daughter had been murdered. And then also the conversation between you and your daughters as well, your loved ones, telling them that you could be gone in the next space of the next few months, or even weeks.
Yeah. That that was extremely difficult. And all the while, keep in mind, I'm not knowing what kind of cancer I have.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of thinking, I'm going to have the best kind, the kind that we can cure, like there was one. But I had to tell, my daughters had known that I'd been rushed to emergency. I went home, I went up the stairs into my bedroom. I didn't know where else to go. And one by one, they came up the stairs and you know, I knew them from their footsteps. I knew which one it was, and they were teenagers at the time. And my eldest daughter walked in, and she's very demonstrative. And I just said, "I'm really sorry, Morgan. I've got cancer." And she just started to wail, "No, mum, no, mum." And then my other little one kind of just put her head in my chest, and I could feel her sobbing into my chest. And that's when I said, "I'll fix it. It's okay, I'll fix it. I'm not going to die." That's what I said to them. And that's when the little monsters started to jump around in my head.